Okay, so on Canvas, sort of underneath where we were working kind of on the measurement and lab stuff, there is a new module and it's just called IA. And so we'll be kind of going back and forth between referring to this IA module throughout the whole process of working on your IA, because we're going to be working on it from now until the end of spring break. Because after we come back from spring break is when like your final draft is going to be due that you're going to turn in of your report. And so as you're going to see as we go through today, there's kind of a schedule with everything kind of broken down with approximate dates and things like that. But we will still be covering, we should still be covering some class information in between on Zoom on some days. And so you'll be kind of going back and forth between referring to this module when you're working on IA stuff and you maybe need to turn something in or you need to look at something for reference. And also for whatever the current module for the notes and the topics that we're working on. So for today, when you look at it, there's kind of different sections. So the first section has kind of an introduction, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. Is we're going to go over this overview presentation and the timeline and the basics. The other stuff, there's a section here that's research resources, and on this page, there is a video presentation from the librarian about how you can use databases if you choose to possibly do something that revolves around using databases to get your information instead of actually coming in to do a lab. So there's some information about databases and how to use them in there. There is a section on writing the IAs that has your formatting guide. So kind of like what are the different sections? How should it be set up? Because when you actually turn it in, your typewritten one, it's going to be, you need to set it up a certain way. And then there's kind of a little bit more of a breakdown about the IA and all the different parts and sections. After that, there are the rubrics, and these are the ones that we kind of went over them a little bit on last week on Friday. And so each one of them here is kind of in their own section. So on Friday, we kind of went over all 5 parts together. And so if you click on each one, it will take you to sort of a page and it'll show you just the rubric for how you're graded on personal engagement. And then this one has just the rubric for how you're graded on exploration, and then all the other ones and so forth. This part you can't see yet. This is something we're actually going to do next week on Monday in our Zoom. We're going to take a look at some sample IAs that have been turned in the past, and we're going to kind of look at them and kind of see like which ones are good examples, which ones are bad examples, and which ones are like the really ugly bad examples, and look at how they scored. So that'll give you a little bit better of idea sort of like what you should shoot for when you're doing yours. Then there's a section on getting started. So like, how do you choose a topic? Because like, how do you figure out and how do you narrow it down to something that's just a research question that you can tie into chemistry? And then what can you do? So this talks a little bit about the different types of things you can do. Like you can come in and actually do a lab and collect data here using our equipment and chemicals. You can do sort of something that's more of an at-home lab. You're just limited on that because obviously like I can't give you, really expensive equipment to take home, and I can't give you any chemicals. So if you do something that, it has to be something that you can actually do at home and still collect good data. And then there's also the database and the online options that I mentioned as well. This page where it says who's doing what, this is just going to be a running list that I'll update. It has everybody's name on it because topics are first come, first serve. So when you think you have a topic or you have an idea, just let me know as soon as possible. You can send it to me in Canvas, or if it's something short, you can send it and remind, because once a certain topic or a certain lab is taken, nobody else can do it because everybody has to have something different. Nobody can do the exact same thing. So that's for me, like once somebody tells me what they're doing and I approve it, I will update this list as we go. So you can always check this list if you want to make sure that like nobody else has already taken something that you're thinking about doing. And then the very last thing that you can see is this part that says submission links. You can't see any of these yet. These are just all the assignments that I have set up, because as you're going to see on the timeline today, as we go, there's going to be things due every so often because we're going to kind of chunk it up and break it down. And then you have a rough draft due before we go to spring break. And then I will give you feedback right as we go to spring break at the end of that week. And then you'll have spring break to kind of do any more final edits, and you'll turn your final draft in. This is the Monday we get back from spring break on March 22nd. And so I'm going to go back up here and we are going to look at this overview presentation together, just so that we can go through it. And if you have any questions while we're on, you can ask them and that kind of stuff. Okay, so basically this is an IA, and in science, IB, IA just stands for independent assessment. And so all your IB classes have them. For chemistry and for all science classes, it's basically it's a lab experiment that you end up doing a report, a paper on. It is worth 20% of your IB grade. The other 80% comes from the tests that you take at the end of the school year. So this year is a little bit different, obviously, because of COVID. Normally, you know, we would be here in class and you'd be able to work on stuff and plan and collect data. And so what we're going to look at is we're going to have basically today, and actually this should be the first 3 days, not first 2 days. I need to update that. But we're basically going to, we started a little bit kind of going over some stuff last week, but really today's the first day that we're going over kind of the details. And then next week on Monday and Wednesday, will be kind of still the getting started days. And then next Friday, we actually have an asynchronous day, so we won't have any live classes at all. So next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we'll still be doing all this prep getting started stuff. And it's the week after that, the next 3 days after that are when you guys will be able to come in and possibly do data collection if you're going to come in person to do it. If you're not coming in person, then you would be doing your data collection from your like online database or your at-home lab or whatever you choose to do. And there are going to be days sprinkled in where you're going to be like have time to work on it. But we, like I mentioned, we are still going to be learning normal material while we're doing the IAs. So some days I might give you more time to work on the A's, but some days we are going to be doing more of a lesson with actual notes material. So there are technically 4 options, okay? You can do an at-school lab, you can do an at-home lab, you can do an online simulation, or you can use online databases to collect data to analyze and do something with. The reason that the at-school lab is kind of bolded and underlined is because this is the one that I am like highly recommending everyone do. For various reasons. Number one, actually getting to do the lab, it's more fun. It's better. It's more fun than like looking at a database and just looking at a bunch of numbers and information. It's also typically easier because you have all of the lab equipment, you have all of our equipment, you know, there's balances, there's, you know, Bunsen burners, there's hot plates, there's, you know, all the chemicals that we have. So if you need acids or if you need certain solutions, or if you need, you know, access to certain metals or whatever, we have all of that lab equipment and all the chemicals available to you. If you do something else, that's not going to be available, and that makes it a lot harder because it limits what you can do, and you have to be a lot more creative. You also have me here because if you come in person, then you can ask me questions while you're here, or if something goes wrong and you're having trouble, we can try to fix it like right then. And so I know obviously it's not the greatest situation with COVID, but you would only be coming to school for like anywhere from 2 to 4 days, maybe. And so if, you know, when you're looking through your options, this is the one that I would recommend because it's going to be the easiest in the long run, because the other ones are all going to be a lot more difficult, not only in how you have to do them, but also in how you're graded. If you do something that's an online simulation or the database, they tend to grade a lot harder in our experience. When we look at like the feedback that we get from the students who have done things like these in the past, you have to have a lot more data and a lot more analysis from things that are either online or from a database. And so because of that, it's like they hold you to a higher standard than if you design something yourself and you come and you do like an actual lab at school. So that being said, if you do an at-home lab, like if you're just not comfortable, your parents like don't want you to come to school, you can do an at-home lab. The only thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be very limited because I cannot loan you out any kind of like, I can't give you an electronic balance to measure masses. I can't give you any kind of chemicals. I can't give you a Bunsen burner or a hot plate. Or any glassware. So I can't give you guys a lot of the stuff that you would have access to here at school. We can try to work together on like problem solving and seeing if we can come up with things that you can do, because there are things you can do. It's just you have to get very creative and you have to think outside the box. You have to do a lot of research to come up with some ideas to kind of get around some of the limitations. Okay. If you do the online simulations or databases, as I said, these are available, but all of us science teachers, we really do not recommend these because you have to have a very large sample size and a lot of trials. So you have to get data from like multiple databases, or you have to look at like multiple online simulations so that allow you to collect a lot of data, and that they're very hard to find. You also don't get to do any like hands-on lab experience. And so if you want to kind of make sure that you're getting that experience of like actually working with the equipment and the chemicals, then coming in and actually be getting that experience, even if it's just for a couple days, is going to be better than this. And honestly, like these are not as fun. Okay. This is a big project and a big task, regardless of which option you choose. But at least if you do the one where you're designing your own lab and you're coming in and actually working with the equipment, the chemicals, it's at least a little bit more engaging because you are getting to experience some of that stuff that you guys haven't gotten to do before. And you're not just staring at a computer trying to read data and look at information. Okay. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna chunk this paper. It's gonna be in different pieces. And so different sections are gonna be due at different times. And we're gonna look at the timeline here in a little bit later. Obviously the timeline is gonna be subject to change. The dates are on there because, that's when everything should be due. But if things are done earlier, that's great. If things need to be pushed back, we can do that. But we do have a deadline, like things need to be done by the time spring break is over, because you guys have to have things turned into me by that March 22nd. Because then I have to grade and use the rubrics to mark all of your labs. And I got 12 of you guys, and they're a pretty big task. It takes a long time because I have to put in detailed comments, because then all of these have to be sent off to IB on April 1st. So when I say that your due date is March 21st or 22nd, that only gives me like a week and a half, maybe almost 2 weeks, to grade and give detailed comments on all of your final drafts, because then we have to send those off to IB to be like double checked. And so I have to give really detailed comments because I have to justify, if I think you deserve a certain number of marks from the rubric, I have to make sure that I'm really clear on like, where do I see the evidence that you had personal engagement, or where do I see evidence that you did a good analysis, or whatever section it is. So I have to have time to do all that. And I want to make sure that I have time to give you guys as much detail on the comments as I can, so that when we send them off to IB, IB sees why I gave you a certain score, or why I think you deserve a certain score. Okay, because they sometimes do adjust your scores down if they don't think that you deserve the marks that I thought you did. So here's kind of our basic timeline. Like I said, it can change. We kind of started last week. So you guys looked at the day where you had the videos with some of the potential lab techniques. They weren't all. I told you guys there are more, that if you wanted to research, you could do more research to look into other options for labs, but I gave you some of the basic ones. And then last time we sort of introduced IDAs, we went over the rubrics. And so today, what we are doing is we're doing this. We're reviewing the Canvas IA module during our Zoom. And then, as I said before, I think you came on, Jalen, what you guys are going to be kind of doing over the weekend is I want you to start brainstorming, researching, start thinking of ideas that are things that maybe would interest you, questions you might have, things that you could maybe tie to some concept in chemistry that you could do a lab or do a project around. And maybe do some online research. Look for, what are some ideas for like chemistry experiments or chemistry IAs that, you know, you could maybe use for inspiration and things like that. And then next week on the 8th, what we're going to do is during Zoom, we're going to take a look at some examples of IAs that have been turned in and they've been scored in the past. And I'm calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly, because you're going to see that some of them are really well done. They're really good. Some of them are kind of bad. And then there's some that are just like really ugly and they didn't score well, like at all. And so we're going to take a look at some examples of each and sort of see how they were graded, how they were marked, so that you guys can kind of see what you should be kind of shooting for. And then you're going to begin this IA prep assignment where that's going to be just more brainstorming research, but you're actually going to be putting it onto something that you're going to be turning in to me eventually. On the 10th next week, which is Wednesday, that's where we're going to kind of meet and we're going to talk one-on-one to see what research you've done, if you have any ideas, so that I can see if something sounds good and I can approve you to kind of start doing your design so you can come in and begin data collection. Because you have to have a topic and then you also have to have sort of your procedure mostly written out for me to approve it. So to say, okay, yeah, you can come in and start collecting data. Next Friday on the 12th, we actually have an asynchronous day, which means that you won't have any Zooms for any of your classes. So on that day, because you can't come in and start collecting data yet, and so your IA prep assignment will be due that day, and then you should begin doing your background research. So that's something that you can do before you come in and collect data, is do your research on whatever chemical. Okay, so what we'll do on that asynchronous day, as I said, you'll just be working on finishing your IA prep assignment and getting that submitted. If you need to talk to me, because if you weren't able to get approval for data collection on the 10th, then, you know, we can maybe do something on the 12th instead. If you needed a little bit more time or if maybe I told you on the 10th, like, oh, that's not really great, maybe rethink this and tweak it a little bit, and you need to get kind of checked again. And then you'll be doing that background research. So again, that's where you need to be looking up, like, what is the chemistry behind what you're going to be doing? So, you know, if you're doing something that involves calorimetry, what are the aspects of calorimetry and like heat and enthalpy? If you're doing something that's like with a titration with acids and bases, then like what's the background on like what acids and bases properties are and how titrations work? So it just depends on what you pick is for what your background research is going to entail. But the background research should include sort of your interest in the topic and kind of why you picked it. And then it should also include sort of the scientific research or the chemistry foundation of like what's going to tie into your lab to allow you to do your experiment. So then the next few days after that are going to be days where data collection days. So these are going to be days where you could potentially come into school if you are going to do one of the at-school labs. And so we're going to talk about how that works a little bit later. But basically, you could begin data collection the 17th, the 19th, and then the 23rd. So I have kind of 3 days built in. If you need a 4th day, like, you know, we can add it in, we can discuss it. That's a little bit flexible. I only have 3 days in here because, you know, typically, it takes you a little while to get things set up. And so the first day always takes longer and you don't really get as much done. And so usually you need a 2nd day and maybe a 3rd day to get all of your trials. Because remember, you have to do 5 variations of your variable, and then you have to do each one 3 times. So you have to do at least like 15 trials. And so it is a little bit time consuming. So that's why there's multiple days built in for that. And then here your background research would be due. And then you would start working on your introduction and personal engagement section of your IA. And then it kind of just goes in order. So then, you know, that section would be due. You would start working on writing your exploration section, which is where you focus on your procedure, your equipment, how did things go? So you'll actually be writing up the formal part of that. After you turn that in, then you'll be in your analysis, because by this point you should have collected all your data and you should be able to do any kind of calculations or make graphs or, you know, discuss and analyze things. And then you'll turn in your analysis. And then the last part you would work on would be evaluation, where you evaluate your data and you look for any of those like systematic errors. You maybe calculate percent error. You discuss how you could improve the lab, how you could extend it, all those types of things. And then communication is really kind of overall. Communication is, are your sections labeled? Do your graphs and tables have titles? Do you have, you know, the correct font and size and all that stuff? Is your vocabulary and things that you refer to throughout correct? So communication is not really like a separate section. It's kind of like the overall of your lab, you know, are things written correctly? And so you usually do that last because you have to do that kind of for all your sections. And then, and then the week of March 8th, which is the week before we go to spring break, you'll be kind of revising and editing based on if I gave you any feedback when you turn in all your different parts. And then you'll turn in a rough draft that week before we leave for spring break. Okay. And then what my goal is if you get it turned in early enough that week, my goal is to give you guys your rough drafts back with some feedback so for March 12th is a Friday. That's the Friday that we leave for spring break. And so I kind of put the 12th through the 14th so that if you guys don't get them turned in until the 12th, then I have a couple of days over that weekend to give you guys some feedback and give them back to you. And then the week that we're off for spring break, you would be taking any of the feedback I gave you on your rough draft, doing any more revising and editing, final edits, and then you would turn in your final draft by March 22nd when we come back. That's the Monday after spring break. Oops, sorry. Okay, so so if you, okay, what is it doing now? I don't know why it's like refreshing. Sorry, guys. Go back here. So if you decide to do the option where you come to school to do for those, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 days to collect data, let me get back to where we were. Okay. So you will be allowed to come into my room if you just decide to do that one. And how it's going to work is you would come to my class like for the whole day. And so it doesn't have to be on a day that your alphabet would come. It doesn't have to be, you know, on, you know, A, B, it doesn't matter if it's A or B day. It doesn't matter if it's what's your alphabet or not. Whatever days you come, and then what you would do is you would come in the morning through your entrance. You would go to wherever they have you sit before they ring the bell. And then once they ring the bell at 7:25 to let you guys walk to your classes, you would just come here instead of going to like first or seventh period. So you would come to my room 1312 and you would stay in this room all day. And you would be working on, if it's during our class time, you'd have time to work on collecting data. If it's during your other classes, then if you're finished with the work for those classes during asynchronous time, then you can use that time. And then you can log on to your Zoom calls for your other classes as you need, and you'll just have headphones so that you can do it kind of in between. And so basically you'd be in here all day and you'd kind of just be working on collecting data off and on when you have time in between your other classes. And so that's why I said that even if you don't want to come to work on your prep stuff, you definitely should come on those days so that you can use the supplies and the chemicals that we have access to here at school. Okay, so getting started, okay, when you choose a topic, topics are first come, first serve. So what that means is if somebody says that they want to just do something about how temperature affects, you know, the rate of reaction of a certain reaction, you can't do that same exact thing. Now you could do how concentration affects, you know, something, or you could do how temperature affects something else, but you can't do the exact same topic. And so it's first come, first serve. And I do have a list that I'll be updating here on the Canvas module as people tell me and I approve what their topics are, so that you can check to see if you're not gonna like double and do the same thing as somebody else before you ask me about it. There needs to be some kind of personal reason. This is part of that personal engagement. So it has to be something that like interests you or something that you have like a little bit of an investment in. And it can be about things we have studied, or it could be about things we haven't gotten to yet. So if you're really interested in like, you know, chemical bonding and you want to see how maybe certain types of bonds are affected by things, you could do that. If you wanted to do something related to acids and bases, because we haven't gotten to that unit yet, you could do that. That would just require you to do a little bit more research on your own, since we have not gotten to those topics yet. But it can be about anything chemistry related, even if we have not gotten to it yet. It has to be complex. It can't be like very real, just real simple. And so when you're doing it, think about tying it to like something global. So if you're going to test how something affects the rate of reaction, maybe think about where is that rate of reaction seen in real life? You know, is there a certain, you know, environmental thing that might be impacted by that, or something in a certain industry where you could, you know, you're testing how that affects a certain reaction, but really that reaction is used in a more complex way or in a more real life way. You do have to get my approval, so you cannot come up and start collecting data without me approving you, because I have to approve it to say, yes, it meets our criteria, but also I have to know if we have the equipment and the chemicals that you need, because if we don't have a certain chemical that you're telling me you want to use, based on your research, then I have to tell you like, no, you're going to have to adjust, or you're going to have to go back and, you know, do something again and think it over, because we're not going to have the things that you need. So you're going to get a document next week. It's called IA Prep, and it's going to outline how you're going to carry out stuff. And that's what that's the first assignment that you're going to have to work on filling in as you're doing your research. Okay. The IA paper, has a rubric. Okay, we went over the rubric a little bit last time. So if you missed it, definitely go back and rewatch that video. You have to have, if you do databases, you have to have 3 to 5 different databases to get sources, or to get information from as a source. So that's why those are very difficult to do. We're going to be doing this paper by chunks. The rubric has a total of 24 points, and then your paper is going to be in MLA format, which is the same format that you do for like English papers. Okay. So here's all the kind of sections. So introduction, personal engagement, you should be addressing things like, why did this interest you? Any kind of the background research related to the basics of chemistry that apply to your topic. How is it motivating for you? And like, why are you curious about it? Okay. It's worth 2 points, and it should be about half a page. You know, it could be a little bit more or less than that, but approximately that much. For exploration, this is where you have to have a research question, and you have to restate your research question specifically. It should just be like one sentence, okay, with a question mark at the end. What are you looking for? Like, what are you trying to investigate? Okay, you're gonna like, you want to see, how does this affect this? And then you want all the science information. So what are your variables? What are the ones you're changing? And what are the ones you're keeping constant? What are all your materials, any kind of equipment, any chemicals, your procedures numbered in a step-by-step format, any safety aspects, environmental safety or like safety, lab safety needs to be included in here. Analysis, this is where you put your data, and it's not a lot of explanation, it's just all your data. So you have raw data tables. If you have any calculations, you show a processed calculation for your data. You graphs, and you have an error analysis, okay? And then your evaluation is really where you're doing the discussion and explanation of your analysis. So you're discussing your data, you're talking about errors, you're talking about what could have been better, how could you change it for higher precision and accuracy, and that's addressing that systematic error and random error. And then you always want to make sure you address your research questions. So did you answer your question, and what answer did you get based on your information and your data? Communication is the one that kind of arches over multiple sections. This is all about like, your citations are correct. You have the MLA format, your terminology is correct. You didn't go over 12 pages and you're not under 6 pages, that kind of stuff. So kind of to end, because the bell just rang, so we're right on time. Start thinking about what your topics are. I'm going to be giving you guys that IA prep next week to start filling out, and start thinking about, you know, are you going to be able to come to school or not? Because if you're not going to be able to come to school, then we need to start thinking about what you're going to do at home, or if you're going to try to do a database, and that kind of stuff. And so on Canvas, I'm just going to go back to the main module really quick. Over the weekend, you guys can be looking at some of the rest of stuff in the module as you're going and you're trying to do some brainstorming. because most of not everything is available to you yet. Like I haven't put all the assignments available to you guys yet, but all of the information is on here, the timeline, why it's important for you guys to be present and actually come in to do the data collection if you're able to. Things like the outline for the sections, the rubrics are all posted on here. Get back down here. There's a video from the librarian on using databases. So if you're really like, I don't think I'm going to be able to come in, I'm probably going to have to do a database. There's a video here from the librarian where she did a presentation for the class on databases, how you use them, and how they could be useful. There's the format and kind of an explanation about the IA. All the rubrics are here. And then the things about choosing a topic, this is a good page because choosing a topic, there are some links and things and some information, some websites on here to help you start brainstorming for ideas and places to look and kind of how to focus your topic, okay? So definitely take a look at some of that stuff over the weekend as you're starting your brainstorming process, because when we come in on next week, we're going to get started on the prep process, okay?